We can speak to our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Hello to you, Doug.
Morning.
Antony Blinken doing his best to, assuage fears from France that they still matter, but France wasn't frustrated. France was downright livid, weren't they?
Yeah, France sees this as literally a knife in the back, a stab in the back, and a betrayal on the part of a trusted ally. And, France has compared this Biden move to something Donald Trump would have done, literally comparing Biden to Trump on this, calling the move at various turns brutal, unilateral, unpredictable, the type of foreign policy that had been more perhaps expected under the previous administration. Remember, Biden came into power with the America's back, came to Europe on a reassurance tour, trying to, like you said, assuage the allies here. But look, at the end of the day, France's anger, it's right and it's wrong. There's a little bit of, yes, wounded Gallic pride here. France feeling that it was left out of and completely ignored, only found out about this deal very late in the game, literally at the last minute. Something, that France sees itself as having cooperated very closely in recent years with Australia in trying to conceive of a new security architecture for security in the region. Up against a more assertive China, trying to project itself more into the world stage. And then this comes along. What's interesting about this deal is that France itself had actually 5 years ago, back in 2016, the time when this it signed a contract with Australia for non-nuclear propelled submarines, had offered nuclear propulsion submarines. Here's the catch. They offered the submarines, but without the nuclear-enriched technology. You can't have a nuclear submarine without the enriched uranium, whether highly enriched or more weakly enriched. You can't run the submarine without the uranium. What the U.S. contract did is that it includes that component in it, not just the actual nuclear-propelled submarines, but the ability to actually enrich the uranium needed to propel those submarines. And this is what's interesting. So it's thought that Britain will perhaps supply that nuclear-enriched technology. America will be supplying the submarines. Australia will be on the receiving end, deploying them in that Indo-Pacific region. So the world has changed, as Australia said. It didn't accept the offer at the time without the nuclear material of just a nuclear submarine. It thought perhaps it could make do with the conventional submarines being offered. Australia realizes it's a major rethink. It recognizes France's frustration and even anger, but it says it really feels like it had no choice geopolitically. The world has changed. The equation with China has changed in the region. They've seen China getting much more aggressive and assertive in the South China Seas with respect to Hong Kong, with regard to Taiwan, any other number of issues. They felt like they couldn't just sit idle and take this delivery of non-nuclear powered submarines. They needed something more agile, more stealthful, able to stay underwater longer, and be able to basically move about more easily. And this does change the security equation for China in a big way.
Yeah, and you're mentioning the world has changed. Might this be a silver lining for Europe in terms of realizing it can't rely on the U.S. to always be there?
Yes and no. I mean, Europe has been talking for a long time, and this is, Emmanuel Macron's sort of big spiel, if you will, that Europe should get its own defense act together, that Europe should not, rely on the American security umbrella. And this is perhaps Exhibit A, case in point, of the fact that Europe can no longer rely on America's security umbrella or America's good intent or America's goodwill as a trusted and close ally of the Europeans, that if Europe really, at the end of the day, wants to ensure its own security and also ensure the security more broadly up against China, it's going to have to, if not go it alone, at least go it a lot more in harmony together with its own plan. What's interesting here is the Biden administration, we know, for China has become, front and center, the highest priority for this administration. The pivot began under Obama. It's become even more pronounced under the Biden administration. All roads lead to what they perceive as a 21st century threat from a rising and growing and more assertive China. And that is at the end of the day where the U.S. is going to invest most of its resources. Yes, nod, nod, wink, wink to Europe. But at the end of the day, all those good words aside, where they know where the priorities lie. My hunch is that the Biden administration, while they expected France would not be too happy with this deal, they probably weren't thinking too much about France's reaction and perhaps didn't even expect the extent of the diplomatic backlash that this is provoking in France, perhaps underestimated the extent of wounded Gallic pride here. But it's the new reality, and will it spur Europe to work more closely together? Perhaps. We've known that Angela Merkel, for a long time, who's now outgoing, has sort of trusted and wanted to remain under that U.S. security umbrella, not break that relation with the U.S. Emmanuel Macron has had a much more independent European policy. He will remain out on the stage after Angela Merkel is out in a few days, and perhaps he will now more than ever want to push that vision of a more defense-united Europe, and he will point to this as the prime reason, the latest reason that Europe needs to get its defense act together. So yeah, there could be a silver lining in this if it spurs Europe perhaps to rely less on the goodwill of America on the world stage.